and I don't think I'm coming through either. So it's something.
Should be good now on mine. Let me see if I can get yours. My computer just updated. It did like this long update, and it must have. Talk to me, Spags.
Check, check. Can you hear me?
We should be good. You guys let us know. Give us a thumbs up if both of us are good. I believe we should both be good now, but just want to make sure of that. And then we should.
Yeah, there we go.
Should be rocking. How about you? You're good?
I think we got it.
All right. Well, let's get started.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, you're good.
Damn, that nice read for nothing. Actually, straight off.
All your heart and emotion put into it. Well, hey, Lofty, you want to talk to us about YSRPs and the value of Yahoo Sports Fantasy?
I would love to, because this is the NFL strategy show where we're taking a first look at ownership and so much more. We're going to go inside the numbers with Spags today as well. It's October 9th, Wednesday, 2019. And the NFL Strategy Show is presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, where you can get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points simply by signing up with us at Awesemo. How do you do it? Well, I'm glad you asked. Go to awesemo.com, AWESEMO. Click on the NFL tab. You'll see the articles right there. Many of them are free. And if you look, let's say, okay, the primetime showdown preview. Click on that. You will see right towards the top of the article the Yahoo link. It is in green writing. Click that, get up to $30 in those YSRPs. It's as good as money to be used, played, and win money on the site. How's that, Spags? Anything to add here on our sponsor?
No, I mean, Yahoo, we have a lot of great sponsors going on. I played on a few of them last week, and I'll tell you what, tough week to go to some of the sites for the first time where it was 50-point running backs at every position.
Crazy.
And that was fun.
Really outrageous. I'm Dave Loughran. With me, Chris Spags. Got a good show for you today. Happy to have everyone here, of course. We're running this show Monday through Saturday, man. You can't find it anywhere else.
No, the best show on the world of DFS, especially on YouTube. I mean, look, we're doing these every day. You do a great job when you do these shows with Manny, with Sal, Chris Randone and Manny doing a great job. I was actually at Chris Randone and on the contrary with Awesemo this week. Filled in great, getting smarter by the day, doing kind of all those, the cruncher type shows with Manny. You guys are doing great stuff. So, I mean, definitely my favorite show to be a part of, especially of the 8 a.m. tier for me on the West Coast.
All right. So we've got ownership. We've got projections. And we're ready to rock, man. So let's just, first of all, anything, I ask this usually every show throughout the week so we don't miss out on anything. Any injury news stand out to you? Any big news across the league? It's funny, I'm in the Philly area, and there were these rumors about OBJ coming to Philly, which just sounds outrageous. But what are your thoughts here? Anything that we need to discuss first?
I mean, so that one, I wouldn't buy. I really am not buying into that. Like,
No,
I think there was an
not.
obvious spot for the Browns to be let down. Like, the Niners defense we're going to talk about this week beyond the numbers, and they are a really fucking good defense. Like, I don't mean to curse so early, but like they are amazingly good on paper. They're good if you watch that Monday night game. And I kind of knew going in, I did one of those showdown breakdown videos where my stance, and I actually felt kind of naked making the stance because I saw the ownership we had for Odell Beckham, the ownership we were going to have for Baker Mayfield. And I was like, I don't think this passing defense gets anything done because Baker's been so inaccurate. Odell's not going to be great against Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman's been one of the best cover cornerbacks in the league on the outside. And they are just disharmonious right now. Nick Chubb couldn't get going. Like, I get you want to change something, but getting rid of the generational talent you have at wide receiver and trading him to Philly, who has, 100 wide receivers who are playable right now, it wouldn't be the best spot for him, I would think.
Yeah, just a couple other things. One of the big ones, I did mention this on yesterday's show with Sal Vetri. If you missed that, go back and check out all of our strategy shows throughout the week, youtube.com/awesemo. We broke down, took a first look at all salaries and all, snap counts, routes, run, targets, workloads from week 5. And Manny Laura and I recapped all of week 5 with a big time strategy show rewind. That was Monday's show. I think you'll enjoy that. Probably the craziest week in fantasy football that maybe I've ever seen. As you just pointed out from a scoring standpoint, it was insane. But David Johnson, Cliff Kingsbury is saying that David Johnson is not guaranteed to play. Mm-hmm. And when you have a pretty decent backup in Chase Edmonds, this is where things get really interesting, Spags.
Yeah, Edmonds has been really good in a limited sample size. Actually been better in terms of generating yards after contact than David Johnson's been. Certainly, not as good overall, doesn't have the pedigree, but with the workload that David Johnson's had, upwards of 11 targets recently, upwards of 20 something touches in games, like, yeah, that could certainly make him one of the more chalk plays of the week if David Johnson's not going to be out there. That Arizona team, though, kind of weird. They slowed things down a little bit this week, in part because they didn't have Christian Kirk out there. The receivers ran their lowest route totals that they have of the year, pretty much across the board. So I don't know what's going on with that Arizona offense, but I guess they didn't need it as much against a disappointing Cincinnati team who couldn't really get the ball going, had a couple stumbles in the beginning that resulted in Randy Bullock getting field goals instead of touchdowns. But either way, the opportunity for Arizona at running back's going to be big. At wide receiver without Christian Kirk, I think you can probably question that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's jump right into it. We'll look at ownership here. We can go position by position, starting with quarterback. Usually I don't really worry about ownership too much when it comes to quarterback. Nothing gets that out of control unless you've got someone that's just wildly underpriced. But right now, and this is kind of what I expected to see, maybe a little bit. I didn't expect to see Mahomes as high as he is right now, second highest projected ownership. You can follow along at awesemo.com. If you do have an Awesemo Plus membership or any type of premium membership. If you don't, awesemo.com/join can help you get that. You get 50% off your first month by using the sign-up code NFL Strategy, all one word, or get a weekly pass for $3.95 a week. Ownership projections, player projections, stack tool, all of our premium articles, and of course the Fantasy Cruncher add-on is available as well, and so much more. But I don't want to take up all of the show talking about it. Just know to use NFL Strategy as the sign-up code. You can follow along with us here. But Matt Ryan right now projected to get the most ownership. I'm not surprised by that. Outside of him, Kyler Murray's somewhat up there, but not even half of that right now. It's Ryan, Mahomes, Jackson, and Watson are your 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. Everything's subject to change throughout the week, and it will, Spags. But I think Matt Ryan will clearly finish with a ton, or, this slate will lock with a ton of Matt Ryan and Deshaun Watson as well.
I mean, Matt Ryan is just throwing so much, and 44 times a game for him now. Going against Arizona, who is still playing with enough pace, even though they did trickle down a little bit last week. Still a 24-second per snap pace, which is one of the better numbers in the league. Not the best number in the league right now, actually, but still one of the better ones. The Rams now are number one. Took a big jump within the last few weeks for them. But yeah, like Atlanta, I think Matt Ryan's a very strong play. I think the issue with Atlanta is they have too many targets now, and too many guys who are running a lot of routes. Pretty much all their core players are getting over 6.4 targets per game. Ridley's getting 6.4. Sanu's getting 7.2. Austin Hooper is getting 8.4, which is just behind Julio is getting 8.8. Like, Julio's still certainly the big play guy. I do think it's harder, I guess, maybe a tournament advantage if you are entering multiple lineups where you can kind of put two of these guys in, mix and match, do some lines with Ridley and Sanu, do some lines with Jones and Hooper, like different approaches you could do that. But like, you really do have to kind of approach this now like the Chiefs, where these guys can go off, these guys can falter, these guys might not even get there. Like, Hooper had a lot of targets last week. It didn't quite have the big day as chalk, and he's going to be probably pretty owned again. We have decent ownership on him. It's like, I like Atlanta, but I think they're more complicated than they may seem.
Yeah, it's the big question is what do we do with Julio Jones? And normally you'd be like, well, of course you just play him. And I still think you still want to get Julio Jones exposure here. There's no doubt about that. But like, are you down on him from where you would have been to start the season?
A little bit, but it's more because this offense is flowing a little bit differently. It's definitely flowing differently than the Steve Sarkisian offense last year, where they were really trying to force the ball to Julio more and more, and they wanted to get him off the schneid with the red zone targets and get him some touchdowns. This year, it's like he's there. He's still an important play. He's occasionally a decoy. He's running the same amount of routes. Catch rate's been a little bit unlucky. A 59% catch rate for him on the year. You would think it's Julio, it's Matt Ryan. They've had this connection for years. That shouldn't be the case. But still, that should trickle up. But even if it does, his targets aren't over 10. He's not getting a ton of volume, and they just have other places they can go. So I'm not down on him or his talent or anything, but I think that offense is designed to not go through him as deliberately as it did last year. And, as we've seen, like with Minnesota, like that's a pretty stark change when you make a directional choice like that. And for this week too, with Arizona, like Austin Hooper is in the matchup, the tight end funnel matchup that's talked about in so many shows. That's the spot where you should be able to catch and run a lot. Calvin Ridley can certainly get open down the seam in this matchup. Sanu has been running a ton of routes, actually running the most routes on the team, and he's been out there quite a bit. So like, it could just go different ways where like, I love Julio. I think he's great. You have to have some because he could break the slate, but it could also just be Ridley and Sanu breaking the slate, and that would just ruin everything if you have a lot of Julio.
Yeah, it would. And I don't know. What's kind of funny now is DeAndre Hopkins and Julio Jones, 2 highest projected owned wide receivers right now on the slate. Odell Beckham 3rd. So these are 3 guys that have been supremely underwhelming. And also 3 guys, and I mean from a fantasy standpoint, also 3 players, Spags, who are the most talented at their position in the world. So right now, like I said, DeAndre Hopkins, Julio Jones, Odell Beckham, they are all 1, 2, and 3 in projected ownership. Could it change? Sure, but I think they'll stay up there. On FanDuel, it's a little bit different. You see Julio and Hopkins and Beckham still in the top 10 at their position, but 5th or lower. And then on Yahoo, I can't filter by position here. Actually, I can. Let me just do this. So on Yahoo, you have, yeah, they're not up there. They're actually, Julio's pretty far down, Hopkins even further down, and Odell Beckham even further. It's mostly on DraftKings where you're seeing them garner a ton of early ownership.
Yeah, it does seem like one of those weeks where we've had the cheaper guys go off. Like obviously Will Fuller last week just murdered that slate in a million different ways, which, does make sense. No Kenny Stills out there. There's a little more opportunity for him, and it was just a good matchup overall. And we all talked about that throughout the week. But I think, this could be the week where the higher price receivers bounce back. Even Michael Thomas last week also went nuts, but his price was down. So I think, it doesn't seem like there's tournament leverage right now and going to these guys because they're going to be, as you mentioned, the 3 highest owned guys, but maybe matching 2 out of 3 of them and just hoping these guys do kind of show the ceiling that we know they have. Maybe that's not the NFL. I mean, that could also be it too. Like I think you have a lot of teams who have a lot more depth. It's kind of like baseball where you have more teams who are just deep from top to bottom, where you have power hitters like the Twins lineup, you have power hitters in the 9 hole. Maybe that's what football is now, where you have a lot more guys who can just hold a lot of targets and get deep downfield and kind of have those big plays. But I think at a certain point, you have to trust the bounce back. And I'll certainly try to get some lineups in there, especially if McCaffrey this week. Try to get some Julio lineups with Hopkins, get all these guys, some Beckham lineups in there. I think they're all due for that big game. They just haven't hit it yet. And that doesn't mean they're not capable of it.
Yeah. I'll put it to you this way. If there was ever a time to get off of guys like Hopkins and Jones and Beckham, I don't think it would be this week. You have to get these players more involved. I know that the Houston put up a ton of points last week, but Atlanta, and you're right about Julio Jones. Atlanta does have options, viable options that they can get to outside of Julio, but you can't keep these guys down forever, including Odell Beckham.
Yeah, I mean, Odell Beckham, look, that was a really tough matchup on paper. And I just think that people have not given Richard Sherman his respect the last 2 years. He was the people kind of, maybe it was a media thing too when he was forced out of Seattle, but the people were just like, yeah, he's not good anymore. He doesn't have it. He was really good on the outside last year. And I think Odell and this Cleveland offense has not shown the ability to beat matchups. I think that's one thing. Like a lot of teams, matchups maybe don't matter as much. Cleveland, they have mattered quite a bit. They've played well enough in games where you should expect them to kind of stomp the other team. And any sort of resistance, they just kind of, cower in response. And I think Beckham in this spot, it's certainly a better matchup than it was last week. I think the bounce back, the rumors, all the swirling that's going around there. Seattle's been a really poor coverage team. That's ultimately all that matters. And I think they're better against the run. So maybe a tougher week for Nick Chubb and Odell. I think you just probably a little squeaky wheel narrative. We saw that work out, not to keep bringing up Minnesota, worked out for Minnesota this week. Maybe Odell, the trade rumors swirling. This is the week where you feed him the ball and try to get him into space because Seattle can get beaten by those guys over and over.
Speaking of bad coverage teams, the Philadelphia Eagles in this respect have been very bad. And of course you could look at last week, but that should come as no surprise that they were able to limit Luke Falk and the New York Jets. I saw a stat today that Christian McCaffrey has more total yards than the Jets.
That was on Reddit, right? Yeah.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, per drive too. He has 14 per drive, and the Jets only get 13.
Oh my God! Yeah. Oh, it's crazy, but it's true. The Philadelphia Eagles, though, they're allowing 271.2 yards per game passing, but that is skewed by last week, right? Because before last week, they had been so much worse than that. I mean, so much worse. They got 10 sacks on Jets quarterbacks. They made it so they could not throw the ball. They do have a very good run defense, so it made it so he had to drop back and still couldn't throw the ball. But, don't get it twisted. Don't look at it and say, oh, well, they were allowing the most yards passing per game and now the sixth. That's only because they faced maybe the worst offense in the entire league. So they are bad. The question I have for you is, Kirk Cousins is coming in right now at sub 3% ownership. This has been a team that is very much run first. Mike Zimmer had stated he wanted to do that. And we saw last season, one of the reasons that they got rid of their offensive coordinator was because he refused to run the ball as much as they wanted. Do you think, based on everything I just said, Kirk Cousins will have to throw more against a very stout run defense that's allowing 60 yards per game, but a pass defense that's been absolutely hemorrhaging points and yards to opposing quarterbacks, so long as they're not Luke Falk?
I think that's a viable case, and certainly the Luke Falk corollary to any defensive stat should be accounted for, because he might be, out of all the quarterbacks we've seen, a lot of guys going to the bench earlier this year, like he might be the worst quarterback we've had in terms of just like not having pocket presence. On paper maybe doesn't show as much because he was mostly accurate throwing short dink and dunk passes. I guess I can't say that before the Pittsburgh quarterback this week, Hodges or whatever his name is, because he looks like he's also going to be very Falky-ian this week too. I think it's possible. I think the thing for me though is that Minnesota's going to run unless you make them not run.
Right.
And I think even though Thielen got there like on a couple big plays, still didn't see a ton of targets last week. Diggs didn't really get going, even though, there's all the narratives around him. So if Philly can score, yeah, but I think they're going to have a tough time against Minnesota. Like I think Minnesota's defense is pretty good. Wentz has done a good job avoiding pressure, has done a better job than people give him credit for probably. But I think especially with the injuries at receiver, but I don't know if they're going to score a ton in Minnesota. And I think it could just be a run game one, maybe a Zach Ertz style game where you're getting those intermediate targets and not trying to blow the top off the Minnesota D. If that's the case, like I don't see the passing offense even coming into play. They're just going to run it with Cook because that offensive line is vicious.
Yeah, they really are. Do you have any other interest in quarterbacks from an ownership standpoint? Because I think a lot of these guys, kind of regardless of ownership, are going to be in play. But what about your thoughts on Patrick Mahomes? We saw last week, he still threw for 321 yards, okay? Time of possession was a huge issue. That defensive line, that run defense for Kansas City was already bad. Now with the injuries, it's even worse. I think it's going to get really ugly for them in run defense. Mahomes usually doesn't have to worry about time of possession because he can go 80 yards in 4 plays. But it was a big issue here because they couldn't get the ball back. Marlon Mack just kept grinding this team down. And now they're hosting the Houston Texans. They're 5-point favorites in a game with the highest total on the slate. What are your thoughts on Mahomes, who appears to be getting a lot of projected ownership, and Tyreek Hill looks like he should be practicing fully this week, so he might be back, and Sammy Watkins is questionable to play, but we'll have to wait on him.
I just think so. Like, there's a lot of narratives with Mahomes this week. I've seen some victory laps about the concept of regression with Mahomes. Like, on paper, he still looks fantastic. It's like he's done nothing wrong for the most part. There were some red zone stats that were a bit troubling, but that's just going to happen when you don't have as Tyreek Hill out there. Like, Tyreek Hill probably killed a lot of those crappy red zone possessions last year because they just didn't have them. He was just getting touchdowns deep downfield. So I think we're seeing more time in the red zone for Mahomes this year, and he's had less success because these guys have been hurt. I mean, the run game, like, Damian Williams has been really bad, and they kept feeding him the ball, but he's averaging just 1.8 yards per attempt so far on the ground.
And McCoy basically got benched because of his pass protection last week.
Yeah, and McCoy didn't do much either. Darrell Williams seems like he might be the best back overall, but he didn't even really see the field. So I just think there's some issues with this team overall, but I think Mahomes' talent is there, and I just don't like the people like being like, oh, he's regressing. He's really not regressing. He's been perfect in every situation for the most part, but the talent's banged up. If Kelsey's a bit less explosive, he hasn't been making those big downfield runs this year. And just no Tyreek. Like, people thought McCole Hardman could come in. I think we all probably thought some hodgepodge of Byron Pringle and McCole Hardman and all these guys, DeMarcus Robinson, can fill in, but really they're not Tyreek Hill. He's a terrible human being, but he is an elite downfield threat who has a vibe with Mahomes. I'll take an injured Mahomes. I think it sucks he won't be able to get out of the pocket as well with his ankle issues, and he does create a lot of value for himself, getting on those bootlegs, getting to the outside. But he's still, he's at 80%, he's still like a top 5 QB and certainly a top 2 fantasy QB. So in a high-scoring game, I'm willing to go there, and I'll pay that price again. I don't see any reason why you wouldn't.
What do you think about Hill and Watkins? Do you think they'll be active?
I would think Hill would be if he's getting in full practice. Watkins seems like more of a concern, I guess. I think one thing that jumped out to me here is the Kelsey ownership that we have right now. And I think the ownership that we have for him, you would assume that this is thinking that Watkins maybe is going to be questionable throughout the week and that Hill's going to be like a game time decision. But I would err on the side that Hill's going to be out there. And I'm just a little bit less bullish on Kelsey with Hill out there. Like, he's still getting the targets. He's still been fine. I just don't feel like he's being used the exact same way. And that could be, just looking at the paper and looking at the data and seeing that stuff. But I think having Hill out there is going to change the game. And I would have a lot of Tyreek Hill this week if he's healthy and he's practicing in full. I think he's been the thing they've really missed. And, it maybe wasn't showing as much against weaker opponents.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you because of that price point. I mean, we've seen he can take the top off any defense. It really doesn't even matter who it is. So that's not even a big concern of mine. Houston Texans, from a pass defense perspective, they haven't been bad. They've been pretty rough now that I look at it. Let's see. 270 yards per game, 8 passing touchdowns. Football Outsiders has them ranked. I think they had them ranked somewhere in the middle.
They're more of a pass rush team according to PFF. They have an 82 pass rush, but 55 coverage grade.
Right. 15th according to Football Outsiders in pass defense DVOA. So like you said, the pass rush is what affects everything here. And that obviously helps a lot when Kansas City has one of they rank, according to PFF, 5th in pass blocking this season. So that's good. I think you're right. I think if Mahomes is playing, and I expect, the only thing that surprised me is his ownership projection right now. I think it comes down a little bit though.
Yeah, it's a high price to pay for him on a week where you do have some guys in the mid price, and you could even talk yourself into some of the cheaper guys. And that I saw people in the chat already saying, like, I'm playing Josh Rosen this week. Like, all right, well, more power to you. And one of the Beyond the Numbers guys is in that game too at QB, and I'm curious about one of those situations. I'm willing to pay some crappy QBs, or play some crappy QBs, including Andy Dalton last week, which did not pay off too well. But yeah, like, Mahomes is just still an elite player, getting one of the highest implied totals, and Houston can score enough, whether it's through the run, as you mentioned. Just they dominated the run last week against Kansas City. Carlos Hyde, a guy who's shown the ability to get a lot of touches, and they have shown the ability to want to run with him, whether it makes sense or not to go to Duke Johnson. They keep going to Carlos Hyde. So there should be points in the game, and Mahomes, whether he's hurt or not. I mean, looking at his numbers now, like, just in every situation, he's over a 100 QB rating. Like, when he's pressured, he's a 96.8. But every other situation, in a clean pocket, a 135.4 QB rating. When he's that's his deep pass. Sorry. In a clean pocket, a 121.2 QB rating. On deep throws, a 135.4 QB rating. 102.8 QB rating on throws less than 2.5 seconds. 124.5 on when he's in the pocket more than 2.5. So that's, like, he's been fine in every situation. It's just, bad luck. Like, I guess you could say that's regression too. But if Tyreek Hill's out there, that changes everything.
Yeah, and he was pressured the 5th most of any quarterback last week. Of course, Luke Falk was the most. That was just brutal. I mean, even as an Eagles fan watching that, I'm like, oh, just get this guy, get the game over, please. Get the game over with. Matt Ryan's taking a ton of pressure. But yeah, Mahomes pressured 19 times last game, and he was brought down 4 times. So, I mean, you're right. I think a lot of it will depend on that, but I trust him in this spot.
He also still hasn't thrown a pick, by the way. Like,
amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, like, he's so good. Like, he's hurt. He's like clearly hurt, and he's had less weapons, and he's still been as good as he was last year for the most part. He just hasn't had the same results, and that's what's going to happen if your top receiver goes out in week 1.
I want to go back to your Josh Rosen point. I'm willing to play some bad quarterbacks too. I probably had a little too much Dalton last week, but here's my concern with Rosen. Like, if you're playing Rosen and you want to pair him with Preston Williams, who I like. Or Devontae Parker, fine. My issue is, like, even at this price point, how often is it that a Josh Rosen-led offense is going to win you a tournament?
I mean, I would assume not many times. To be clear, I'm not interested in Josh Rosen. I saw people in the chat talking about it. I'm more interested in the Washington.
I knew what you said. Yeah, I knew what you were saying.
Yeah, because, like, I think those guys actually are competent enough where, they're actually accurate QBs. Like, to me, accuracy is an important thing I look for, because accuracy just means, well, it means you're completing more passes. So that's one thing you can learn from the NFL strategy show. That's an important part of fantasy, is completing passes. But more important than that, it's just, like, you're getting guys, like, in space and stuff. Even if you are a dig and dunk quarterback and you're going against a team like Miami who really can't tackle, doesn't have a lot of defensive talent, like, that's a team who would be affected. Washington coming off, a Bill Callahan week, who's now the coach in there. They could run the ball more. They could squeeze the air out of the ball. The defense maybe can improve slightly. I don't know why Bill Callahan would affect that, but just that new coach bump that happens sometimes. There's enough ways where that could go south for Miami. Whereas like Washington, I think if you have Colt McCoy or Case Keenum out there, those guys aren't good. Like Colt McCoy kept getting sacked over and over again by New England. Didn't turn it over. Didn't screw up that bad. Still completed like 67% of his passes. Like those are the guys who can do damage. Josh Rosen hasn't shown the ability to complete passes, which again, an important part of playing QB. Only on the NFL strategy show we learned that.
I think the new coach bump can be beneficial for like a half or a game.
Yeah.
Unless you completely overhaul things, but I could see it making a difference here. Not to mention, they know this is a game that they can at least get a win.
Yeah. Oh, I think they could get a win. Look, I mean, it's actually a very compelling matchup in some respects because it's so bad, but also both defenses are so bad where theoretically, like, the offense should have some potential. I am trying to avoid, because of the Andy Dalton thing, like, I don't want to use this as like a seminal moment because it's something I always know, but I do always think like, Andy Dalton's playing a crappy team. And you kind of forget like Andy Dalton's also on a crappy team. And
right.
That is an important part of the equation too. And, the Miami line is not good. The Washington line is also not good. So who is less not good? I think it's hard to say it because they both suck so bad. And I think that's sort of the question that we have. I think Washington has a little more ability to suck less bad because we saw them score. Like they scored a good amount against Dallas in week 1. Like they have the potential to score. Whereas Miami, I don't know what the situation is where they can actually score.
Right. That's the problem. And even if I don't mind taking individual pieces, maybe a little Preston Williams here, a little Devontae Parker, who's been an air yards king this year, despite not catching many of them. I think you can make sense of that, but yeah, look, the game has a 41 over under. The Dolphins have an 18.75. Sorry, I'm still a little sick here, trying to power through it. 18.75 implied total. I guess the way I see it is, all in all, I know he's very cheap, but he's also very bad, like you just said, and any team that has sub 20 implied total, it's hard to feel great about stacking them even if they're cheap.
So one thing, Christian Fernandez in the chat right now, not to single him out, but he's saying Rosen has been laying perfect dimes, but wide receivers have been dropping them. Lock it up. No, he's not been. He's been the 77% accuracy QB in a clean pocket, which is actually under average because a clean pocket's your most ideal situation. Under pressure, he has been a 40% accuracy QB with a 17.8 QB rating. So a light breeze can throw off Josh Rosen. On deep passes, 40% accuracy. Also, maybe middle range, teetering on bad. In a short pocket, he's only got a 58.9 QB rating. So under 2.5 seconds when he's holding on to the ball, 56.3 QB rating. And, it also does include like wide receivers dropping balls. The point is he's not accurate. So that's you seeing something. Look at the data. Like you gotta get these PFF grades and stuff, or these PFF numbers, because that's showing you what the actual accuracy is. They grade accuracy based upon, is it hitting the wide receiver like in the numbers, somewhere catchable.
Correct.
So he might be having 1 or 2 of those passes a game, but probably 10 of them are not there.
Yeah, and Josh Rosen and Ryan Fitzpatrick had actually been combined attempting.
Did I lose you?
Sorry, I was muted. Josh Rosen and Fitzpatrick had actually been combined attempting the most deep attempts in the league this year, at least before the start of week 15 or week 5. Josh Rosen has attempted 15 deep passes this season, and he's completed 4 of them. So, that's his 40% is his adjusted completion percentage on that, as you mentioned. Like, that's his actual completion percentage is 26%. I think there have been 2 drops, but still, he hasn't been sharp.
No, I mean, like the thing is, these like Brian in the chat now saying he's right. The numbers don't tell the whole story. The point of these numbers that PFF creates are telling the whole story. Its accuracy is not. It's not a completion rate. Completion rate is different than accuracy. Accuracy means it's in the range that should be caught.
That's why it's an adjusted completion percentage and not his actual completion percentage.
Yeah, that is not. Yeah, that's not a thing that Rosen has not been accurate. Like you can't look at what he's done and say he's been accurate. He probably has passes where he could be accurate, and maybe those could be the biggest plays that make up for it. That's also a thing that can happen that can mask numbers too. But ultimately, play after play, he is not accurate. I think that's.
And I know these numbers aren't perfect. Like there's always blind spots. Like of course, there's always going to be blind spots. But I think some of it may be a psychological thing, Spags, where people look at Rosen and he makes a couple nice passes. And I'm not saying this is, anyone from our YouTube chat doing this, but I've seen many comments where it's like, oh, Rosen looks great. Well, Rosen might look better than the Rosen you remembered in Arizona, but that Rosen you remember from Arizona was the worst quarterback in the league.
Yeah, like I went to USC. I'm a USC fan. I'm wearing a USC shirt right now, as you can see. Like Josh Rosen had some monster games against USC, and I actually thought he would be a competent pro quarterback, and he's not shown the ability to do it, whether he's just, the confidence thing or whether it's just the talent that's around him. It's not working out for him right now. And, it's certainly been less than ideal situations for him in two spots, and I feel kind of bad for him. Like if he'd gone to the Giants, he could have been Danny Dimes this year maybe and had that one big game, and instead he's in Miami floundering. But maybe he's not as bad as it seems, but he's certainly not good either. And I think you could make a better case for Washington's QBs to be like, these guys at least are pro quarterbacks. Like Case Keenum would be a star in the XFL. I think we can all agree. Would Josh Rosen? Questionable.
Right. Let's take a look at some running backs. Leonard Fournette, again, projected to get a lot of opportunities, as he always does. I've begun to call him the poor man's Christian McCaffrey, Spags. And before you call me crazy, really just think about this. He's on the field almost as much. He's on the field a ridiculous amount of time. But not only is he on the field a lot, played 92% of snaps last week, 100% in week 3, 84 in week 4, 97% in week 2. Not only is he on the field and getting a lot of opportunities in the run game, but Leonard Fournette is now seeing pretty heavy involvement in the passing game. He's seen 30 targets through 5 weeks. He's averaging 6 targets per game. So look, is he ever going to get to that same passing volume as Christian McCaffrey? No, of course he isn't. But he is the exclusive running back in Jacksonville. It's not even close. There's nobody else. And that is one of the reasons why, with an 18% target share, which is pretty good for him, and almost all of the running back carries, which is why he's going to be at least in play every single week.
Yeah, I think too, one thing that's going to benefit him is I don't love the matchup for DJ Chark this week. I think DJ Chark is a very good running back. I think we've talked about him a few times on the show. He's one of those, to me, like ideal body type guys, also has really good control of his body when he's catching on the sidelines. A lot of things that are very impressive. And he's clearly vibed. I mean, he had the big week, so it's easy to say this coming off of the huge week, but clearly has a vibe with Gardner Minshew. But he's going to be going against, probably getting shadowed by Marshawn Lattimore, who has had a few tough games to start the year. Last 2 weeks, he held Mike Evans to no catches last week.
He owns Mike Evans. Owns this guy.
He does. He's had a lot of success against him. Evans had, I think, like one monster game, but 2 straight weeks now, he's shut down the guy against him, and I think DJ Chark is going to get that treatment. So I think you could see more checkdowns for Fournette, could see more work out of the slot for D.D. Westbrook. But I agree, Fournette, he's not the explosive play, even though he has had some big plays. He's not the explosive play overall like McCaffrey. Like, he's not shifty on every single play, but he's still getting great yards after contact, one of the better yards after contact numbers in the league, getting 4.3. And that's despite getting a ton of touches, getting almost 20 rushes per game. So that's like a good running back, just, not a fantastic offensive line. But New Orleans also hasn't pressured the run too well this year either. So I think Fournette's worth the ownership, especially on a week where we don't have McCaffrey, who you should just be playing McCaffrey at high volume every single week, I think, no matter the matchup.
Oh, yeah, no question. And look, I have a lot of respect for the New Orleans Saints run defense. I really do. But I don't think that we should let that overshadow everything that you just pointed out. Minshew could have a very difficult time getting the ball to the guys that he wants to get the ball to. I think D.D. Westbrook's interesting, but like you said, DJ Chark could be in some trouble in this matchup. And while Teddy Bridgewater had a solid outing last week against one of the worst pass defenses in the league, I don't see him erupting again in week 6, which you could see this being a neutral game script for Fournette, where it's competitive, a 1-score game throughout, and he just continues to get fed. And these are the types of games where even if it's not the greatest matchup on the ground, 20 plus potentially 30 total looks is always in play.
Yeah, I mean, the volume, we talk about it every week. Volume is king for running backs. And when you have a guy like Fournette who's getting 25 touches a game and could stand to get some more in the spot, I really have no issue going to him. Like, I think Jacksonville, the game plan clearly centers around him. They want to take some risk away from Minshew. Minshew can probably do more than they've allowed him to do, but they've decided to keep it close to the vest. That's how they want to do it. And that's going to benefit Fournette. And I think, they've shown the line play has gotten slightly better week to week as well. I don't have an issue with chalk Fournette. I think it's scary to go into a chalk running back situation, but if we're getting the touches, we know we're getting the touches. Like even Zeke, do you really know you're getting 25 touches? Probably not. So Fournette, you do know that.
And there are some other guys. We can get to, no question. But Fournette right now, it's only right that we break him down in depth because he is the highest projected running back on the slate. I believe he's the highest projected player overall right now on the slate. Yeah, that would be correct. Looking down a little bit, though, Le'Veon Bell, I think Sam Darnold returning should really help him. I mean, look, Sam Darnold's not prime Peyton Manning, okay? No one's pretending that this is like the biggest upgrade ever. But I'll tell you what, Spags, compared to what we saw from Luke Falk, this is a big upgrade. I mean, it is significant just based on how badly the quarterbacking was. You can't get the ball to an explosive guy like Robbie Anderson. You can't even get Jamison Crowder, a possession guy, basically an extension of the run, involved. Darnold being back should at least open things up a little bit for Le'Veon Bell. They should be able to at least move the ball, maybe get some red zone opportunities. And all in all, if there's one thing about Le'Veon Bell that stands out, it's that this guy, and I, by the way, really respect it. I know it was the whole money thing and all of that, and it was frustrating to a lot of people, but he's out there acting like he's in the Super Bowl in games where they don't have a damn chance. So at least I know that regardless of score, Lev Bell is going to get the ball. He's going to bust his ass. He has every capability. He's every bit as capable of making big plays. And that's really all that matters to me. On the season, too, you've got him running. He's ran 120 routes. Mind you, he's only played 4 games. So he's going to be up there with everybody else in the event that once they all play the same amount of games. He's getting a lot of ownership right now, but his prices come down. They are big dogs at home. But once again, a volume thing, how much does that play into it for you, knowing that he's just so heavily involved and in PPR formats getting 10 targets a week?
Yeah, I mean, the touches here that he's getting in the pass game, I mean, 8 targets per game is a very nice number to be looking at, I think, for him. And the price being down also helps. I do worry a little bit. I mean, I guess he can't fully get game flowed out with that amount of pass targets, but I do worry if it cuts to a ceiling a bit because the Jets' just offensive line grades out really poorly in pass blocking and run blocking.
That's why I was not on Bell last week, by the way. I know he was projected high, but you just knew he'd get nothing on the ground, and it could get ugly real quick. He's salvaged, though. I think his floor is very high. Sorry to cut you off.
No, it's fine. Yeah, and I think those are very valid points. Like I think the floor is there for tournament upside, and at his ownership, I don't know that we see that upside. Like I think too, it could be a bit of a chase where Dallas just got gashed by Aaron Jones. Le'Veon Bell is a very good running back, but the Packers offense is built around the concept of getting Aaron Jones as such as, whereas the Jets offense is built around whatever dumb shit Adam Gase is doing in a given week. And I think a lot of dink and dunk passes, a lot of short plays are not meant to extend the defense. So if Darnold looks slow, if his spleen is still swollen up, I don't know if that's going to go. Maybe a little sluggish out there.
Spleen game on fleek.
his spleen game. That spleen game looking thick. That's some high key thick spleen for Sam Darnold. But yeah, I don't know. Like I just don't trust. Like I'd much rather have Fournette as a chalkier play than Bell. I get the price point. The price point's appealing. The amount of pass game work he's getting is appealing. I just don't know that I see the ceiling. I would be afraid to not come close to it, but I imagine I'd be under the field on Bell just because this offensive line, I think, is really bad. And I think if you have a really bad QB like Falk back there, it's going to be even worse. Darnold could probably do enough there, but I don't know if he can create value for Bell and Crowder. I think this is a better week for Crowder. Like, honestly, I think Crowder's going to get peppered with targets again because he had like 18 in that first week 1 spot with Darnold. And I think it could be a similar thing where just pressure over and over again, and then Darnold just has to keep checking down. I
think you could be right. I do. I think you could definitely be right. Bell right now garnering plenty of ownership. So is one more guy, Alvin Kamara. But this to me is a pretty ideal spot. According to Football Outsiders, the Jacksonville Jaguars rank 32nd in run defense DVOA this season, Spags. That to me is surprising. But you know what? The numbers aren't lying to us here. Even Pro Football Focus has them graded at 60.8. That's 6th worst in the league in run defense. If you're looking at yards allowed per game and a few other stats, this has been a Jacksonville defense that has not really graded out well against the run. So what is your thinking on a popular but not insanely popular Alvin Kamara on a slate? Never mind. Nonetheless, that does not include Christian McCaffrey. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I think the number's certainly back there. You mentioned the yards per rush overall, giving up 5.5 yards per rush. I think is certainly a number that's a little high. Yards per rush on a perfect stat, but certainly an indicator of something that's not great there. And Kamara just hasn't gotten there the last few weeks. So
that's the worst in the league, by the way, 5.5 yards per carry.
Yeah, that's not a good number. That's worse than Kansas City. And you watch Kansas City and you're like, wow, this team, I don't even know how they're doing this. So that's an impressive they could somehow have a worse number. But going to be a slow-paced game here too, which I think would benefit the run games. New Orleans playing at a league, one of the worst paces in the league. I'm not sure where they currently rank, but 30.3 seconds per snap. Jacksonville also on the slower side, 28.9 seconds per snap. So that's a pretty slow one too. So I think you're going to see the run game be important here. I think Michael Thomas still, going to be in play. We saw last week that monster game. He's getting 9 to 10 targets at least with Teddy Bridgewater. I think that's fine. But Kamara also still getting those 20 touches a game and 20 touches against a Jacksonville defense who can't defend on the run and also has gotten much worse in pass coverage D without Jalen Ramsey. It doesn't seem like he's coming back. I think Kamara's in a really nice spot. And it's Teddy Bridgewater just seems like he ruined something. I don't know what he does with Kamara. Kamara hasn't looked quite as explosive, but the opportunity's been there in terms of touches.
Saints are 31st in pace. As you mentioned, 30.3 seconds per snap. Jacksonville 20th. So, yeah, I mean, that's not super appealing. But with a guy like Kamara, I think this will be a great spot for him to bounce back. Tampa Bay's run defense is very good. You and I mentioned this last week. Like, they are sneakily very, very good in terms of being able to stop the run. So, this game is a 44 over/under, a 1-point spread. Those are all things that stand out to me in favor of Kamara. What are your thoughts for some of these other high-owned guys? We have David Johnson up there, but I don't know if he's going to play. Nick Chubb, Mixon's still getting some. Dalvin Cook scares me in this spot. What do you make of the double-digit owned guys? Anyone stand out to you for good or for bad?
I think Cook, I don't mind as much. I just think that they clearly have a focus there. It's not a bad matchup. Like I really thought that was going to be a better matchup for Zeke, but he just got kind of game flowed out once Jones went away and they really passed the ball quite a bit. You saw a lot of yards going to Gallup and to Amari Cooper down the stretch. I think it could be a spot here where Dalvin Cook gets going. I think it's overall like going against Philadelphia is a spot where I think the run defense is going to be a little better, but I think overall, like they are still going to feed him the volume. I'm looking at too many things at once. Yeah, but like Cook, I think is fine. And Zeke this week, I think is an interesting play. Going against the Jets, I think are just not going to be able to keep up. And I think that's sort of the game script that's going to favor Zeke. That was my brain. That's my 8 a.m. brain function, by the way, is I merged two things in my head and then talked about them both at the same time. But Zeke, I think is a guy like ownership, not that high on him. I think people are starting to get down on him enough where it's time to go back there. I think people too, if they watch the box score, they'll be like, wow, Zeke didn't get it done. Even though everybody said he was going to kill Green Bay. Like there was a logical reason why he didn't. They should be up on the Jets pretty much right away. And I think the Jets should be playing catch up. I think it's going to be a spot that benefits Zeke, and we just have not seen a ceiling game from him. And I think this is probably the week where with no McCaffrey, like you really should go back there. Didn't pay off last week, but I think this spot, it's hard for me to imagine the way that worked out last week happening again. And Zeke still almost had a big day. Like he almost had 100 yards on a TD overall. He just didn't quite get the amount of touches. But here, this is where you want to salt it away with him, I would think.
Chris Herndon has a hamstring injury, so he might remain out. One more guy I want to mention. Below 10%. If there's anyone you want to talk about, feel free to toss it in there. Carlos Hyde. I feel like Carlos Hyde should probably be getting a little bit more attention than he is, especially given that these projections have David Johnson active. Like if David Johnson was out, then I totally get it because Chase Edmonds becomes like uber chalk across the board. I don't see any way he doesn't. But I mean, Carlos Hyde's involvement has been enough to where against this Kansas City team, man, you've got to feel like he'll have every opportunity to really put up some serious numbers. Like, first of all, this was already a bad Kansas City defense. Now you have it even worse with the defensive line being in trouble. Who was it that just hit the IL? I think he tore his ACL. I have to look it up again because I can't remember. I'll go by team here, but I don't know, man. I think Carlos Hyde has had upside for 20 carries in certain spots. Man, Xavier Williams, by the way, defensive tackle. He just hit the injury reserve.
Okay. Yeah, I had no clue what you're talking about, but I do remember seeing somebody, and I wasn't going to guess the wrong name.
Yeah. Chris Jones doubtful. They lost a bunch of players. It's rough. Like it's very rough here. If it wasn't already, they ranked 31st in run defense DVOA. They're allowing 5.3 yards per carry, 155.8 rushing yards per game. Carlos Hyde is not expensive, and he comes into this game coming off of a 21 carry performance against Atlanta where they just, iced the game down. They're going to have to throw more against Kansas City, no question, but you have to take a page out of Frank Reich's playbook and say, we got to do everything we can to eat up clock against a hobbled Patrick Mahomes.
And I think the onus comes on the defense there. Is like, do you trust the Houston defense to be able to kind of oppress Kansas City for a long enough time that Carlos Hyde has use? I think that's a viable question here. So in our Osmo league, I'm basically going to have to play Duke Johnson this week because I just have nobody at running back left who I could play credibly with LaShawn McCoy being so non-involved. But I actually do think Duke Johnson, because I think Carlos Hyde's ownership is going to go up. I think a lot of people are going to see those rush numbers. They're going to see what happened with Marlon Mack. I think they're going to be intrigued by the value point and think they can hold them off. And I don't know that Houston can hold them off. Like, I think if Hyde were under 10% owned, I think that's certainly a nice spot to go a little bit above the field on him. But if you got to like 15 to 20, then I think that's time to start thinking about Duke, because Duke's still running routes. We talked last week about the fact that Duke's just been probably a better running back overall. They're afraid to give him the touches. He's averaging over 6 yards per attempt, 6.4 yards per attempt, over 4.3 yards per after contact per attempt. Like, Duke Johnson would be the guy I think you'd want out there in the spot. And I think he would be a guy who would be a really nice pivot to Carlos Hyde, even though Hyde certainly has value, but I just don't know that I trust Houston to be able to ward Kansas City off, especially if Tyreek Hill's back out there. Like, that's danger zone for Carlos Hyde.
I like both of them, but not in the same lineup. I'd be more than willing to roster both of these guys for every reason that you just mentioned on Duke Johnson, but also because, look, Patrick Mahomes might come out, put up early numbers. But if you've got the ball, you're Deshaun Watson, you're Bill O'Brien, you've got the ball, you're going to look to move downfield. You're going to, see if the aerial attack can work for sure. But there's just no doubt that when you're looking over this Kansas City Chiefs team and you see that they allowed 180 rushing yards to the Colts, 186 to Detroit. One of those games they lost, the other they barely squeaked out a win by 4 points. 203 rushing yards to Baltimore, 129 to Oakland, and only 81 to Jacksonville. But it's gotten progressively worse. This is a team that's been gashed so badly before the injuries. I like both running backs here, and I think both could have pretty big games. Any other running backs you want to talk about?
Mark Ingram, I think, is an interesting play. I think with the really high team total here, Cincinnati, just not a good team. There's so many ways Baltimore can score. I think this will be a game where Lamar will kind of open it downfield a little bit more. I think they'll take that leash off here, because I think this is the game where you want Lamar to feel good about himself after a couple of weeks where he hasn't quite been able to show the same ability that he showed the first couple of weeks. So I think that's a little bit of a risk, but I think Ingram, it's so easy for him to fall into 2 touchdowns here. I think it's hard to totally avoid him at that price point. The guy like Le'Veon Bell, who we discussed some of the risks with, going to be much higher owned at a slightly higher price point, I think is a pretty natural pivot. And he's been really good on the year. There's been nothing wrong with him. They don't give him a ton of touches, but still getting over 15 touches a game, just under 17. I think that's a really nice spot going against a Cincinnati team where it's just be running and just trying to get out of there, and they're dominating time possession. So all the stuff seems like good benefit Ingram.
Okay. Talking wide receivers, we already kind of teased it earlier. Hopkins, Julio, Odell, and DraftKings at least getting 1, 2, and 3 ownership here. All of them 17% or higher. But is there anything you want to add to that? Anything on Beckham?
I don't think there's anything. So one thing that jumps out to me is that Jarvis Landry's actually been running more routes, which does interest me a bit, because I like the game that Jarvis Landry went off 2 weeks ago. I was like, oh, that actually makes sense, because, Baltimore not great in the slot. Beckham, they also haven't been great outside. Baltimore's defense, by the way, just might not be good. I think that's something also kind of interesting if you want to go back to Andy Dalton.
No, they're bad, dude. It's bad.
Yeah, no, it's bizarre. You add Earl Thomas and you get substantially worse. I know they had injuries, but it's really blows. I don't know how that happens. It doesn't really make a lot of sense.
It doesn't.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think that there is some value in going to Beckham just overall. But yeah, I think there are questions there. Baker's been really bad. He's just not completing passes. I think it's going to be, as we talked about, San Francisco is a good defense. I don't think the spot is as bad this week overall for Cleveland. So that's going to benefit them, I think. But just going against Seattle in a kind of an overrated pass defense, a historically good one, but another one that's not good. So I think it's a spot where I don't hate the idea of Odell, but I think just you have this viable of a case to go to Landry, I think, overall, because he's just getting the same amount of targets and slightly more routes.
I tweeted something yesterday on Tyler Boyd, and I'm going to, if you don't follow me on Twitter, well, you should, but that's okay. At Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D. If you don't, I'm going to tell you here what I tweeted, because I think it's pretty important for week 6, at least for this one player, and that's Tyler Boyd. Some notable slot performances against the Ravens this season, Spags. That was odd. I felt weird calling you Chris.
No, I mean, that's my name. That is my given name, but either one is fine. I'm I'm a little bi with my name choice. No, like, I don't know.
When people call me Dave, I like double take it, unless it's, my parents, my mom, I mean. Landry, 154 yards. Now, this is not his yardage total in the game. This is just when he runs routes out of the slot, okay? 154. Hardman and Watkins combined for 167. Fitzgerald and Kirk, 160 combined yards out of the slot. Tyler Boyd has the 6th most slot yards in the NFL this season. And I'd gone on to say the only question is, can the Bengals keep Dalton upright long enough for it to matter? So breaking it down a little bit further, the Baltimore Ravens pass rush is 31st in the league, ahead of only the Miami Dolphins. That bodes very, very well for opposing offenses like Andy Dalton that have trouble being able to keep their quarterback upright. But to take it a step further, they just lost. This is big. They just lost Tony Jefferson for the season with an ACL. And when Harbaugh was asked about, I think this was this morning or yesterday, asked about Jimmy Smith's status, he said that he won't give a timetable for his return, but he hopes that he will return. He has his fingers crossed it'll return soon, and he's doing well. To me, Spags, that doesn't sound like he'll be back for week 6.
No, I mean, look, and this defense, as you mentioned, just a poor sack rate, a 5% sack rate for him. I do think this spot, though, going against Cincinnati is kind of a get well spot where if you do have the ability to start pressuring more, this is probably the week to do it, because Dalton's getting sacked at a pretty high rate, 9%. He was over 10% last week. The Cardinals didn't get a ton of pressure on him, but still, it really didn't send a lot. They still got decent pressure on him for most of the plays. So I think there is some risk that I think Baltimore could just be a little bit less bad, because they were a really good defense last year. And there really isn't a material reason to think. I mean, they've lost a few guys, but nobody who I feel like would affect things overall at the level that you see them being affected this year. But I would agree, like, Boyd's been good. He's getting short targets as well. And Andy Dalton has not been able to hold on to the ball too much, at least with any sort of comfort. 10.6 targets per game for Boyd. Like, I mean, last week I thought Tyler Eifert might get some looks because of the matchup against Arizona. He ran the least routes he's ever run for some reason. Auden Tate had the touchdown, but really wasn't the most involved. I think Tyler Boyd is a safe play again this week. And, I think just 10.6 targets a game, you're not seeing numbers like that. I mean, Julio's under 9, Hopkins is under 10, like nobody's at that range. So I think Boyd has value and upside. And if Baltimore stinks again, he could be a guy who actually has to score, because the offense is going to score. I think that's not a question.
Right. I think so too. Talk to me about some of these other guys. We can't go through everyone. And of course, that wouldn't be fair to everyone that pays for ownership projections, but we want to give you a good idea of what we're working with early in the week. Landry getting some ownership, Watkins, assuming he's active, Cooper Kupp, Robert Woods, Fitzgerald, anybody up here Brandon Cooks as well. It's seeming like, wow, this Rams team, much of it is because Woods and Cooks are cheap, but man, I've got to tell you, Spags, I don't feel overly confident about it after seeing what we saw from this 49ers defense. And look, some of that, no question, some of that blame falls on the shoulders of Baker Mayfield, but the 49ers through 4 games ranked number 1 in pass defense DVOA and number 5 in run defense DVOA. Maybe that's not sustainable through the whole season, but they've looked good in both phases of the defensive game.
Yeah, I mean, well, I kind of want to segue over to the Beyond the Numbers one, because
let's do it.
Yeah, because I think this actually is a really important one. So it's out of sequence now. This is gonna be the main event of Beyond the Numbers, but let's put it out there now. So I'll read the whole thing because I think it's just an interesting fact. So the
Please.
Rams this week implied for 27 implied points in week 6 against San Francisco. And as a team, San Francisco allows a 53.5% completion rate, 5.44 yards per pass, deflects 27.1% of opponent passes. They also sack the QB at a 9.2% rate, and Jared Goff falls apart when holding onto the ball over 2.5 seconds. He has a 63.8 QB rating when he holds onto the ball over 2.5 seconds. He also has a 68.6 QB rating when he's pressured. So I really think like if the Rams are going to be owned, I'll be there a little bit, but I won't be there as much as the field because I think San Francisco actually can win this game. I think it's a high total. I think that's scary. But Goff at home is a better quarterback. I think that's also a thing in his favor. But I just don't think they're going to be able to hold off this Niners defense. I think they're going to come in hungry. I think the Monday night game gives you some pause that maybe people will chase that a little bit more, or they'll just be like, oh, this defense is amazing because they just shut down Baker Mayfield. But Goff is just bad in less than ideal conditions. And I think he's going to have really suboptimal conditions against the Niners.
Yeah, so do I. And sometimes salary isn't enough because I think we will have some other cheap ones. But no, those are some great numbers there, man. And across the board, the Niners defense has looked really good. I'd be lying if I said I don't have any concerns here because I do. They have a good pass rush, true. Do you have any pivots that you like at this price point? Because DJ Shark similarly priced to Cooks and Woods. I can't say either of us feel great about that matchup with Marshawn Lattimore. Is there anyone here that you like? Maybe Calvin Ridley, who is not really getting any traction at all from an ownership standpoint?
I mean, Boyd, we talked about, I think he's a pretty strong play in that range. Marquise Brown, an interesting spot for him. I think he's, a little bit undervalued right now. His price is still pretty high, but he still certainly has the upside. His routes are down a bit. Seth Roberts ran the most routes for Baltimore last week, which is kind of odd, but still the big playability is there for Brown. I think he's a guy you could go to. I don't hate the idea of the Denver receivers, even though it's been mostly Cortland Sutton they're getting every week. Tennessee is a tough defense going against them, but still a spot where I think theoretically they could have some value. I think there are places to go with them overall, but yeah, I think the Rams, just a lot of ownership for Rams guys, and maybe that'll come down a bit because of the Monday night game as things kind of adjust as the week goes on. But I would be comfortable taking the shots at a few of these. Like Larry Fitzgerald is going to be pretty decently owned. I don't mind taking a shot there either, especially if David Johnson isn't in. I think that should open up a little bit more for him as well. I think just being unafraid to kind of spread that around a bit, sort of like an MLB slate where you have pitchers you're in a questionable range. You're like, yeah, I'll take this guy. I'll take some, I don't know, some John Lester in this range. I'll take some Adam Wainwright in this range. Like guys you don't really feel the most comfortable with, but are in a nice spot, I think, are places I would go to more because I have some legitimate questions about the Rams this week. And Kupp, I think, will still be fine, but the rest of the guys, I don't know. Kupp and Woods can have that game, but I don't know that I trust it at high ownership.
Terry McLaurin at $6,000 is projected for sub 1% ownership. Trey Quinn at $3,700, less than 1% ownership. I mention this because I want to set up another beyond the numbers stat that you have and get your take here, not just on the quarterbacks, but on the passing game in general. Case Keenum's completed 68% of his passes. Colt McCoy plays 67% of his. Does that make?
Oh, my bad.
Is that complete?
This might have been written a little early today.
That's okay. Was that completes though? It is, right? Okay.
Yeah, completes. Yeah.
Miami allows almost a 74.4% completion rate, 10.3% passing touchdown rate. My God, I'm just seeing this now, and 296.3 passing yards per game as an average is whichever. And by the way, a lot of that has to do. It would be way more if they weren't, one of, if not the worst run defenses as well, is whichever of these two emerges as a starter under interim coach Bill Callahan, playable in week 6. And feel free to wrap in the ownership for McLaurin and Quinn here as well.
Yes, I mean, we have no ownership at all. It looks like on Washington right now, McLaurin going to be under 1% on DK. Adrian Peterson, who I think could see more involvement here. He was in the Jay Gruden doghouse. I don't know that he's going to be in the Bill Callahan doghouse because Bill Callahan is a guy who does like to run the ball historically, does kind of operate. I have some questions about the offense. I don't know that they're going to spread the ball downfield. Obviously, Bill Callahan's still been in the meeting rooms and stuff. I do wonder if maybe we'll see less deep targets from McLaurin, but I think McLaurin has value in the spot, and I think Keenum or McCoy will be able to get the ball to him versus Miami. So I think it's an intriguing spot for whichever those guys starts. I would prefer Keenum. I think Keenum's a little bit more of a competent quarterback, but I think anybody could be competent against Miami. Like I think you could put out a flag football quarterback against Miami right now. And as long as they have a good head on their shoulders, I think they'll be okay. I think McLaurin's an interesting spot. I mean, the price point sucks. It sucks he's getting priced up for Miami, but it's a spot where he can certainly have a big day. He and Paul Richardson could have a decent day too. I think there's a lot of guys here who intrigue me as low-owned plays where if people are afraid to go this game, like we have two bad defenses, we have two bad offenses, but Washington's offense, I think, can be closer to competency, and that would certainly help out McLaurin.
I don't want to play Case Keenum, but I would feel perfectly fine with McLaurin at 1% or less. And I get that a lot of that is because of his price point. I get that Callahan wants to run the ball more, but you're not going to you're not going to run it or pass it 0 times per game. Like there's still a good chance they throw the ball 30 times here, but just look to emphasize the run. McLaurin has proven that he's very, very capable of breaking off big plays. And to me, he's somebody that simply stands out as too low owned, even at that price point. You know, he's averaging 2.03 yards per route run this season, which is really solid. He's played on a team that's just been downright awful, yet he still manages to contribute. He still manages to put up big numbers. So these are all reasons, in my opinion, to give him serious consideration. He has 9 deep targets as well, despite only playing 4 games. That is, more per week than Julio Jones, than Allen Robinson, than Calvin Ridley. There's simply put, Spags, there's upside here, and that's really what it comes down to.
McLaurin too, I think it's worth noting, like he actually runs a decent route tree where he does run shorter routes too. Like he does get the deep targets. He does get 15.8 air yards per target, but it's because he's getting a good mix, as you mentioned, of the downfield targets, 2.3 targets of 20 plus yards per game. But they will run him on slants. They will run him on some hitches. They'll run him on some other plays and try to get him the ball to give him a chance to make a play. So I think McLaurin can be in a really good spot here because Miami can't tackle. Miami can't pass defend. It's weird that Terry McLaurin is 6K, given that he's kind of quieted down a bit and just played New England. There's no reason for him to take the price jump, but he does have, I want to say slate breaking upside because we really don't know what this offense is going to look like, but he does have massive upside against Miami if he just is healthy enough, if that hamstring is good enough to go. And it looked good enough versus New England. Like still had a decent showing, even though New England is actually like a very good defense.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk tight ends here and then we'll head out. We got one more beyond the numbers as well. Travis Kelce, a lot of projected ownership right now. A little bit surprising to me at that price point, especially given that I like this spot for George Kittle at a discounted cost. And of course, a lot of people are going to be on Hooper. You should have seen YouTube chat yesterday, Spags. Everyone, Hooper's a free square. Don't be stupid. Boy. You can't fade Austin Hooper. If you fade Austin Hooper, you're dumb. Well, you know what? Let's jump into it because Hooper has played really well. But is it a free square at $5,000?
I would say no, because it's just like I love this spot for Will Dissly 2 weeks ago. Josh and I have talked about it at length 2 straight live before lock shows because he really felt like that wasn't a good tournament play. I did feel like it was a one where you take to open up some other things, and I think that was how I just felt about it, was that it opened up some things lineup wise. That was a logical place to go to. I don't think you have that here for Hooper. The thing, though, for him is that he's running a lot more routes. He's running 38 routes per game, getting targeted over 8 times per game. He's going against Arizona. He does actually have good yards after catch numbers as well. He's at least right there for tight end. He's right at the yards after catch after expectation numbers, so that's pretty good for a tight end. He's not George Kittle, but he's still in that range of where you want him to be. Can run, gets good separation, 4.1 yards of separation per target. And against Arizona, that can pay off if you're getting 8 targets a game. I don't think he's a free square because you have Mark Andrews at that price point. You have Kelce if you pay up for him. Like there's enough tight ends who can beat where he's at. But I think for cash, I would probably prefer Hooper for cash over Kelce, even though the ownership is going towards Kelce, because I just don't like the high price point for Kelce where Tyreek Hill could take a lot off the table. There's other ways they could score there. Hooper, I think, is going to be involved enough. It's hard for me to see him not having a decent day. For tournaments, though, I wouldn't lock him in. I think he's a stellar play.
What about George Kittle?
I like Kittle. It's just this San Francisco offense just wants to run. That's all they want to do is they want to run the ball. I think they want to squeeze the air out of it, and they're running really well. All of their guys, like Mostert, Also, Tevin Coleman and Matt Breida, all over 5.5 yards per carry. So that offensive line is doing a stellar job against everybody, getting good push. I think they're going to need to do that this week more than anything, where if they believe the defense can beat the Rams like we do, I think, or at least I very much do, and I think you also are kind of on board with that concept, I think that they can definitely lean on the run game there and get some good pressure and get some good push and get their guys where they need them to go. So I don't know that I trust Kittle. I do think in game scripts where the Rams score, if this chalk Rams ownership does pay off, then yeah, Kittle is more of a viable play. But he's only running like 22.8 routes per game. That is not enough for a guy where like Hooper at a cheaper price running 16 more routes per game and a high scoring spot with a lot of pace. I would favor Hooper over Kittle, but Kelsey has the floor and the upside. So I think Kelsey over Kittle for me would be the way that would shake. I'd probably go Hooper, Kelsey, and then Kittle, I think, for those three.
Yeah, if there was a game where I think you could see more opportunities for Kittle, this would be it. Because, just looking at San Francisco's games, I mean, not even competitive against Cleveland. That Pittsburgh does not have a high-powered offense, and they showed that. Then Cincinnati, Tampa Bay, and Winston was terrible in that game. So maybe this will be one where Shanahan's forced to do a little bit more. But all good points. I think it makes sense in all those respects. George Kittle in week 5 ran 26 routes, same as Howard and Greg Olsen, who had 0 receptions, and Howard, who had 1 for 10. But it is nice to see that, as far as yards per route run, Kittle is 2.69. So he's doing a lot with those limited routes, at least.
And he's right where he was last year. Like, for whatever the volume that's gone down for him because they want to protect Jimmy G, or they just know that they can win the way that they've won, which is running the ball and with defense. He's still been as good for himself. So whenever the opportunity is there for him, I think he's got that ceiling. So, but I'd just be more inclined for him where I know, like, oh yeah, the Rams are scoring, but I have Kupp, I have Cooks, I have Woods. I'll run it back with Kittle, I think would be the way I'd want to do that. But I just don't have faith in that game being high scoring because I don't think that's how the Niners win this year. They just need to bleed the ball as much as possible.
Yep. So Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown both received almost 8 targets per game. In week 5, Andrews ran more routes than Brown with 27 to Brown's 22 for the first time since week 1, with one of the highest total matchups on the slate against Cincinnati's putrid pass defense. Which one of them is more playable, Spags? And we've already talked Kelsey. We've already talked Kittle, Hooper. We can get into Ertz, but let's start with Mark Andrews here.
Yes. Also, one thing that somebody in the chat noted, which I did miss, is that Marquise Brown actually left that game in the second quarter. So that's certainly going to affect him too. But I guess that only adds to the argument then where I think this is a really nice bounce back spot for Mark Andrews. I guess the issue is that his ownership is going to be there, but the targets have been there, like getting almost 8 targets per game for him, even though he's still running just slightly more routes than Nick Boyle, slightly more routes than Hayden Hurst. He is running more routes. And I think this spot here with a very high total, a really bad Cincinnati defense across from them, I think it's a really nice Mark Andrews spot. I could see some lineups where I might have both Andrews, like a combination of both tight ends, because I think Andrews in a really good spot. Hooper's in a really good spot. Those guys are cheap enough. They're kind of priced like mid-tier wide receivers, and they're getting the same outlook. They're getting the same kind of outlay that a mid-tier wide receiver would get, possibly even more. So I think they're really nice tight end plays on DK at their price points. Fantasy draft as well, nice price points. I think these guys are really interesting, and I think they both have big upside. And I think people are going to chase too the big wide receiver games where it's like we saw these guys all having big days. Tight ends can still have big days too. And I think if you're getting 8 targets a game at tight end, that's pretty valuable. And we're paying a premium for Kelsey this week, so why not go to these guys?
Yeah, Kansas City and Baltimore both have 29.75 point implied totals. So you said it. I mean, this is a very high implied total for Baltimore, tied for the highest on the slate. Actually, let's see if it's it's the exact same as Kansas City right now. Yeah. So you mentioned Mark Ingram earlier. It is a good question. Like, where are you going to Baltimore to get exposure here? Is it mostly Andrews? Are you pairing him with Jackson? Do you get Brown in there as well?
They're a weird team where I could see, and I think, well, I don't know. I don't want to say this to talk out of turn, but I do think there are positive correlations historically with running backs and tight ends. For some reason where they do correlate slightly better, probably because of goal line opportunities, I think would be the thing. So I don't hate the idea of going with Jackson, Ingram, and Andrews. And Brown, if he's healthy, obviously going to be still the big play guy, still running enough routes to have that, to deal out that damage against a Cincinnati team who can't defend anything. But yeah, I think Jackson, Ingram, it's sort of not a natural stack because I would certainly like to have more of a correlation where you have the 2 receivers with your QB or a tight end and a receiver with the QB. But I think Ingram is going to kind of rise with that tide, and Jackson can rush it in. Andrews can rush it in. Naked Lamar certainly not out of the question either. But there's going to be some scoring here, and I think they should score about as close to effortlessly as possible because Cincinnati can't defend anything. And Baltimore's offense, for whatever defense struggles we talked about, that offense is legit good and can just smash it down people's throats over and over again in a variety of ways.
All right. Looks like that'll do it for us, man. It's been a good show as always. Anything else to add, Spags, before we head out? Anything to throw out there? Any promos that we got going on?
People are just real fast talk about Will Dissly in the chat. So Will Dissly's routes still not taking a big jump up. He did have that one day with Fournette out there, but he only ran barely more routes. Still overall at 19.4 routes per game. I like Dissly. I think he's extremely talented, but I wouldn't say it's like somebody in the chat was like the disrespect, not mentioning Will Dissly. I think he's a valuable target. I like him enough. I've talked about him on a variety of shows and defended him, but I don't think he's in the tier of these other guys. These guys are like integral parts of the offense where Dissly is kind of a nice to have, I think, for Seattle. What do you think about Dissly? I
think our stream is not working right, so I don't really know what's going on here.
So who gives a shit?
That's what I was going to try and get out. I mean, we basically hit on everything. If there's ever a good time for it to die, it would be now, but I don't know why. Anyway, anyone that's listening, that'll do it for us. Thanks as always for tuning in. Be sure to check us out at awesomemode.com/join if you haven't done so yet. Follow Chris Spags at Chris Spags, myself at Lafayette_D. Sal Vetri and I'll be back with you tomorrow.